Hello, this is Warlord, and thank you for joining me for episode 5. We've got several topics to cover again, and we're going to get started with using the hinge, physics hinge, as a rotational engine. After that, we're going to take a look at spoofing a volumetric streetlight. This is something I've been at quite a bit. Then we're going to get into how to control the hair physics on the stock ponytail. This is another question I get asked a lot. After that, we're going to go into our third discussion on stacking motions for forward movement. This involves some other things that can happen depending on what series of switches you have set. We're going to take a look at the basics of three-point lighting. And it's just going to cover the very basics so that in the future we can go over it in more detail. So that's about it. Let's get started. In one of the first episodes, I covered how to do rotation. And then iClone 7.1 to 7.2 actually changed that to where rotation is a lot simpler to do. But there's also still two ways to do rotation. And one involves manually, the other involves using the physics engine, which really doesn't take much at all. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'm going to load in a cylinder. I'm just going to size it down a little. And then let's rotate it. And then I'm going to bring in a tire graphic. And you'll notice it doesn't center. Don't worry about that. You can come in here to cylinder cap, but I would recommend using, well, I'll show you why. Cylinder capped. Let's see which one. Yeah, Z. But you notice when you do something like that, you get the same image all the way around. I would use planar and hit apply. And if you want to get rid of those stripes, that's actually the white corners that were on the image. So you could go into something like Photoshop and just knock that white out of there. But anyway, this will give us some reference. And iClone has made it real simple. All I did was just move to the end of the timeline, and then I'm just going to move it. And you get a rotation that doesn't go back on you like in previous versions of iClone. It just keeps going. To do that, of course, I just went to the very last frame and spun it. Of course, it helps to do it on the right axis. And that's basically how you do that. But to me, there's also an easier way to do this, especially for mundane things, props, things like that. And that's to let the physics engine do the work. So let's go get a constraint. And you can think of this particular constraint actually as a rotational engine. It's the hinge. And what we want to do is make sure it's centered. Now the graphic may not be perfectly centered, and I didn't try to perfectly center this one. So it may look like it has a little wobble. But choose one or the other. And then let's come over here to line 2. And let's center that up. Then we're going to make it freewheeling, remove any limits, and I'm going to activate this to about a 6. And if you want to go the other direction, something like a -6. Now we're getting some wobble in there, like I said. You can just come in and take a quick look. But this could also be this graphic. I just took it off the web. I didn't cut it to make sure it was perfect. And doing it with just one angle here, we still may not be getting it perfect. But you see how that works. And that's pretty simple. And you have a speed control over here where you don't have to keep twirling it and things. And so that just makes that kind of rotation very simple. Now let's move this aside. I'm going to bring in another cylinder. And then I'm going to duplicate that cylinder. I'm going to make kind of a rotating information kiosk out of these. You'll see what I mean as it builds up. It's a very simple prop. This is going to be the base. Of course, want it a little taller. then we can just come over here to the old original metal, nothing fancy, metal 2. Put it on the base. Grab a graphic to drag over. And of course you're going to have to set this just like you did with the other one. And in this case, I would go ahead and use the cylinder capped in case you don't use a top. Probably be the Z-axis. And that way you get a clean mesh up there. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this up and have a top and a bottom. Then I'm going to duplicate it and just shrink it a little just to give it just a little more detail. So what we can do is come back, turn off our last two so we can see the top of this. Come over and get our hinge constraint. Go ahead and line it up so we don't get a wobble. Make it freewheeling. Activate it. This needs to go slow. I'll set it at 0.1. And you're getting the picture on that. Now what we can also do here is you can come in and dress this up a little with your self-illumination. Maybe you want to make it a little see-through. And you notice this box, as far as the physics go, it's got the box on it. And that doesn't seem to matter because all we're doing is just using this for the rotation. So another thing we can do is come in and add a glow. You wouldn't really want to overpower it. But you're getting the idea on how simply to build something like that. One thing I failed to do is remove this bump map. When we actually went back and reset the UV map, then that made this bump map worthless. And all it's doing actually is just getting in the way. Since we've got opacity cut down, you're not really seeing it. But I would go ahead and delete that. And in this case, you might even just want to go to traditional for something like this. Okay, let's go back out a little. Grab this one. Duplicate it. And this is just another little simple thing that you can do to add detail to like a building or something like that, is to add a fan. Well, that is if you hit the actual thing you're going to put it on. Then what you want to do is come in here, put the same one over on the opacity channel, then invert it. And as you see there, you could put that in an open box, something like that, and you wouldn't have any trouble adding a little detail, because that's only 240 faces for something like that. And of course, again, you want to come in and take a little more time to actually trim your image to where it's straight in the center, and to also set this constraint to where it at least centers your image. That shows you just the difference in these two images. But anyway, that gives you an idea of how to use the hinge constraint for a rotational engine. Okay, now we're going to look at mimicking a volumetric streetlight. This is something else I get asked quite a bit. I've got the combat stage loaded, which is one big prop, and in order to move in it, I have placed a subprop or a box over one of the light poles. That way I can just easily move in, rotate around it, and don't have to worry about not being able to select that light pole since it's part of a single prop, or part of the terrain, I should say, in this case. Now to get started, let's go ahead and set up an actual light. Come over here and create light, spotlight. And then what we're going to do is just position it. course we'll want to rotate it down. You can always come over here and check to see where you're at on your rotation. Things like that. Move out just a little. Now we go ahead and position our light like however you want it. This would be personal preference. I always like to shoot my range all the way up because we can control the cone with the angle and the fall off. And now that gets us just our spotlight part as far as actual lighting it up. Now let's go get us a cone primitive, 3D block. You might be tempted to use a cone like this that has a flat top, but sometimes you'll find that once you size the top of it, the bottom's not the right size. So I usually start off with just the regular cone. I'm going to drag it in. And I usually also start by sizing it as far as overall scale first. Then I worry about my up and down and placement. I'm going to come in here also and turn off the spotlight representation. Then I'm going to come in here and you can either delete this or just put it down to white. It doesn't really matter. Also, we'll come into the opacity. Now this is all personal preference here. You may want to use a glow. And then in some cases, people like to come in and also use a gradient map. You can make your own. There we go. And what it's done, of course, is just kind of filter out the bottom of it a little bit there. Now what we can do also to make it look a little better is come in and actually work on our light again. And set our angle and fall off to kind of match our cone. And I don't think we're exactly lined up here. Let me center that just a little. That way our angle will meet our cone better. And you can just play with variations of this. Now, this is not a real light, so it's not going to act like a real light. You're not going to get the reflections things that you would off of a real light. But it does give you some bit of a volumetric representation of something like a street light. There's trade-offs in using it. And of course you're going to want to actually get it centered better than I have here. But basically just tweak it until you get it to where you like it. And to do that, just use a combination of maps and opacity. I've been getting some questions about controlling the stock hair, particularly the ponytail with physics. You notice here how when we start it kind of explodes. Now that can be dealt with by just delaying your motion. And then you just cut that out in editing. But as you can see here, it's jumping around quite a bit. Not exactly what you would think of as the way hair would react. And there is a simple way to handle that, and particularly until you understand, you don't have to worry about if your own hair or cloth or anything like that. Just come over here and turn these down. In fact, just go just about all the way down or go all the way down the first time. Take a look, and you'll notice already we don't have near as much explosion when we start off. And the movement just looks a little better. You just don't have as much of it flying around. So just start off with a low setting and work your way up. Previously, we've looked at stacking motions for forward movement and some of the problems you can run into. Those problems revolve around these settings right here. What is checked? Align actor motion, reset motion root, and align to actor orientation. Now, one of the problems we had was keeping it in a straight line. And when all of those are checked like they are, I'm going to go ahead and load this twice. You'll notice that he does not stay in a straight line. So we know that we can come back and change that simply by coming in and unchecking that. And you'll notice he stays in a straight line. Now let's take a look at what happens when we uncheck Align Actor Motion and we load up our two motion. You'll already notice there's a difference there. Okay, now I'm going to remove it again. And this time we will uncheck Reset Motion Root. Do the same thing. And as you see there, you're getting different results depending on what you have attached, on what you have checked, I'm sorry. So for simple motion stacking, what we need to do is just make sure what you have checked here. You want to check everything except Align to Actor Orientation. Now you can add as many clips as you want, and it will continue to run forward. Let's take a look at basic three-point lighting. Now there's a lot more to three-point lighting that we're going to go over here. But let's just look at the basics, because to me, particularly in this instance, like a still image, of course it works in video too, I use three-point lighting to combat harsh shadows and things like that. Now we have no regular lights in this scene. As you can see over here, this is just driven by GI. And if I were to just use one of the lights, as you can see, like the fill light that I have on, it does a pretty decent job if you were doing a mood shot, but there's a lot of shadow in there. Of course, the backlight leaves way too much shadow by itself. And the key light, it is what actually, it's the main light. It's what actually you're going to use to light your subject. But no matter where you put it, it's going to cause some shadows. And shadows around noses and things like that can really make things look bad, particularly in a photograph. Now, we can spot those before we render them when we're doing it like this. But as you can see here, no matter what we had shadows. So let me turn these back on. Here's our lights. So again, let's go over this. We have the key light over here. Let me turn these off. And this is a standard three-point setup. We have the key light over here, which is our main light. This one right here. It's the one lighting our subject. Now, the secondary light, the fill light, is usually to the opposite side of the key light. And what it does is just soften those shadows and then eliminate them. Then we have our backlight, which is usually placed behind the subject and lights it somewhere from the rear. What you're seeing here really is, as I said before, a standard three-point lighting setup. Now again, there's a lot more to this than just what we've discussed. But you can already see the difference in how lighting reacts. Let's just take out the key light. As you can see, it even in cases that puts a very funny shadow on the side of the face. If we take out the fill light, then you have a different kind of harshness on the opposite side of the body. So all these are trying to do is eliminate some of those shadows by drowning them out with lighting. We've come to the end of another episode. I appreciate your joining me, and I hope to see you next time.